everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I'm so thrilled you're tuning in today, because we're going to be tackling something that affects, well, literally every single one of us. We're talking about the neurological mechanics behind our modern attention crisis. We're going to break down the hard science of exactly how we gain concentration, how we lose it, and the frankly fascinating biological systems that are running behind the scenes to govern our focus. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. We have all been there. You hit that 3 p.m. wall, you feel completely, utterly wiped out, but then you look at your to-do list and realize you haven't actually accomplished much of anything. It is so incredibly frustrating, right? But, as you'll see today, there's a very specific physiological reason why your brain feels like absolute mush in those moments. Section 1. The modern focus crisis, and what happens when multitasking literally breaks the brain. So, we usually just blame ourselves for this. We think, oh, I just have terrible willpower, or I'm just scattered today. But the reality is actually rooted deep in our biology, and specifically how our brains handle digital fragmentation. To really get this, we need to talk about a concept documented by researcher Sophie Leroy. It's called attention residue. Think of it like literal physical dust just settling inside your brain. When you switch tasks without finishing the first one, like say you pause writing a big report to quickly answer an email, a chunk of your attention gets stuck on that unfinished report. That residue actively eats up your working memory. You aren't just shifting gears, you're essentially dragging this heavy invisible trailer of previous tasks behind you everywhere you go. And when you look at the data on this, it brilliantly illustrates why this is such a massive problem for us today. The drop is just staggering. Back in 2004, the average screen attention span before a person switched tasks was about 150 seconds. By 2012, that had plummeted to 75 seconds. And today, we are averaging a mere 47 seconds. We are living in this constant state of kinetic attention, where we're forcing our brains to rapidly context switch, piling up all that attention residue until we are just entirely cognitively depleted. Moving right along to Section 2, how we actually lose concentration, diving into the neurology of distraction.
So, what is exactly happening inside your head when your focus just collapses? Well, our attention is actually controlled by this incredibly intricate dance between large-scale brain networks. The big player you need to know is the default mode network, or DMN. When you're daydreaming or worrying or just letting your mind wander, your DMN is highly active. Now, to do deep, focused work, another network, the salience network, has to step in. Think of it like a tiny switchboard operator in your brain. It recognizes what's important, flips the switch to turn off the DMN, and fires up the executive control network to keep you locked onto your goal. When you lose concentration, it's usually because that switchboard failed. Your brain just couldn't quiet the DMN, which leaves you trapped in that internal loop of wandering thoughts.
And this ties in so perfectly to something called the Zeigarnik effect. This is a psychological principle stating that unfinished tasks are remembered far better than finished ones. Why? Because the brain keeps an open loop. Every single time you get interrupted, your brain opens up a background process that just sits there, constantly monitoring for a chance to finish the task. It's exactly like having 50 tabs open in your web browser. Those open loops drain your very finite pool of attention. It is the literal, biological explanation for why you feel so scattered. Section 3. ADHD and cognitive burnout. Running in high gear. Now, what's really interesting here is that these biological realities do not impact everyone in the exact same way. When we contrast a neurotypical brain with an ADHD brain, the differences are pretty stark. For a neurotypical brain, you've got a steady flow of dopamine keeping you motivated, a brain structure called the thalamus filtering out background noise, and that default mode network deactivating perfectly when it's time to work. But in an ADHD brain, dopamine levels are irregular, which makes starting boring tasks feel literally agonizing. On top of that, the thalamus lets in way too much environmental noise, and the DMN really struggles to shut down. So an ADHD brain is burning immense amounts of fuel just to reach a normal baseline, which leads straight into severe cognitive burnout. Because we're talking about profound neurobiological differences, sometimes behavioral tweaks just aren't enough, and clinical medicines or treatments are necessary. We're seeing amazing results with advanced medical interventions like deep transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS. It's a non-invasive, FDA-cleared treatment that actually physically targets and stimulates those specific executive functioning circuits in the brain. By directly stimulating these networks, it helps build a kind of neural resilience against burnout, effectively giving the brain its capacity for deep concentration back. It's really incredible science.
Section 4. Training the brain to focus through metacognitive and behavioral interventions.
The good news is, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical, Attention is not just some fixed trait you're stuck with. It's a muscle. You can train it. One of the absolute best evidence-based methods for this is called the Attention Training Technique, or ATT, developed by Professor Adrian Wells. It's basically a 12-minute audio workout for your brain. You start with 5 minutes of selective attention, focusing on just one individual sound in your environment. Then you spend 5 minutes rapidly switching your focus between different sounds. And finally, 2 intense minutes trying to process all the sounds at once. It's literally a gym routine for your executive control network, and it is amazing for quieting down that hyperactive default mode network.
And this gym-like training directly parallels how we approach meditation. Studies show that focused attention meditation, which is just anchoring your mind to a single point, like your breath, actually increases what's called frontal midline theta activity. That's an electrical rhythm in your brain directly linked to sustained attention. Every time you catch your mind drifting and you physically drag it back to your breath, you are stabilizing your focus. You absolutely have to build that baseline foundation before you even think about moving on to the more advanced open monitoring types of meditation.
Aside from meditation, we can also restructure how we actually sit down to work. You've probably heard of the Pomodoro technique, but the real magic is how perfectly it maps onto your brain's natural metabolic cycles. You go hard for 25 minutes of intense, single-task focus, zero context switching, zero attention residue. Then you take 5 minutes of waking rest. That means no screens, just staring at a wall or grabbing a coffee, letting your brain consolidate information. And here's the kicker. Successfully finishing that 25-minute block triggers a hit of dopamine in your brain. It creates this natural, biological reward loop that actually makes you want to tackle the next task.
Section 5. Environmental and Physical Restoration, or How to Design Your Surroundings for Optimal Focus.
So you can't just train your brain in a dark, empty room. Your physical environment plays a massive role in this. Back in the 80s, Stephen and Rachel Kaplan developed attention restoration theory. They realized that staring at a spreadsheet requires heavy, directed attention, which drains your cognitive battery super fast. Nature, however, is totally different. Nature uses what they called soft fascinations. Think of leaves blowing in the wind or water flowing. It's effortless. It engages your brain without draining it, giving those overworked executive control networks a totally essential restorative break.
The cool part is we can actually hack this indoors using biophilic workspace design. By bringing in natural sunlight, adding some organic geometric patterns, keeping living indoor plants on your desk, or just having a view of some greenery outside, the data shows you can actively lower your cortisol levels, you reduce your blood pressure, and you get significantly better performance on tasks that heavily rely on working memory. It's wild, but it really is that straightforward to give your brain a biological advantage.
And hey, don't forget about sound. Finding your personal Goldilocks zone for background noise can completely make or break your workday. For a neurotypical brain doing complex analytical work, absolute silence is usually the winner. But for an ADHD brain, pure silence can actually be physically uncomfortable. This is due to a phenomenon known as stochastic resonance. By playing low-volume pink or brown noise, you introduce this random baseline acoustic signal that actually boosts the brain's internal signaling. It gives an understimulated ADHD brain exactly the right amount of background arousal it needs to finally lock in and focus.
But listen, absolutely all of these behavioral and environmental hacks will completely fail if your foundational biology is off. Check this out. A drop in body water of just 1 to 2%, which is barely even mild dehydration, is enough to trigger a massive, measurable plunge in your cognitive endurance. When you're even slightly dehydrated, your brain literally has to work harder and fire more neurons just to achieve the exact same results, which leads directly to that 3 p.m. brain fog we talked about earlier.
And that brings us to the ultimate physiological medicines for your mind. Hydration keeps your brain from overexerting itself. Aerobic exercise is crucial because it releases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which acts like Miracle-Gro fertilizer for your neurons, directly boosting executive function. And deep, slow-wave sleep, totally non-negotiable. That is when your brain's glymphatic system kicks in to literally wash away the toxic metabolic waste you generated from thinking all day. Without these 3 physical pillars, long-term focus is just biologically impossible.
Which leads us with this final, really vital question to chew on. Are you just trying to manage your time, or are you actually managing your cognitive load? You see, time is just a human invention, ticking away on a clock. But cognitive load? That's the actual, finite biological fuel your brain uses to interact with reality. By understanding your neural networks, treating your attention like a muscle you can train, and optimizing your physical environment, you can finally take control of that fuel. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I truly hope this changes how you approach your daily focus.